Hello. My name is Darcy. I'm a student in the MA graduate program, and I'm really excited to introduce Sundar Raman. Sundar is a creative engineer and former director of technology at the Museum of the Future in Dubai. Sundar's work merges engineering and art, treating technology as a creative medium and a facilitator for innovative expression. Currently, he is the technical partner or CTO at Present, an experienced design firm focused on cultural and commercial engagements, where he leads work aimed at creating compelling, integrated experiences. Sundar is an avid urban forager with a particular interest in unique fruits. Welcome.
Okay, lots of acts to follow. This is amazing. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It is super exciting to talk to all of you. I've had a great time going to your classrooms and actually chatting just around as we've had different little conversations. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more. I'm going in a very, very different path from the rest of the speakers. There's very little that I'm going to say about myself. I promised that I would talk about the most boring stuff ever, and you guys will get some of that. But also I'm going to go across quite a broad range of different things. So part of this is, I'm just going to make sure this works. Yes. Okay, cool. So part of this I'm calling as a provocation on design for today and tomorrow, because a bunch of these are just ideas. Okay. So most of what I think I wish I had other people tell me when I went through a design process or an engineering process is the stuff that often doesn't get talked about in a school setting, because it's the stuff that you learn about when you're actually in the real world. And all of us have actually gone through that. My co-speakers we've kind of commiserated on some of this stuff. Okay. So generally I don't do an agenda, but here's my agenda for what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to be going all over the place. So maybe this will hold on to some kind of a thread. Nobody came to see my rock, Fear and Loathing and the Promised Land, who's down with scenography, what needs to be done, what are we going to do about it, and are we there yet? And storytelling is dun, dun, dun. Okay. All right. Nobody came to see my rock. So the idea of what we do, this thing called experience design, sits in a stack of different things. So all of you have been to museums, yeah? Raise your hands, please. Everyone has been to a museum. Has anyone not been to a museum? 0 people have not been to a museum. Does anyone, my premise around why a museum exists, I used to work for the Museum of the Future, and people would be like, oh my God, how can it be the Museum of the Future? It doesn't make any sense. Museums are about history and artifacts and stuff. But nobody actually goes to see a rock. You don't go to a museum to just look at a rock. The rock has some kind of a narrative around it. But it's to extract out the narrative, this is the work that we really do. And in many cases, this is the narrative that I grew up with, where kids go to a museum and they see a bunch of stuff, and whoa, I don't know what happened to the text there. Hopefully that's not with all of the text. But this, for example, is the museum in my hometown in Chennai, India. Okay, this is real. This was taken a few months ago. And all this says is pots and bowls. This is today, okay? So this is my little niece, and this is the image that I always have in my head of when I am doing design, because somewhere in her head, she crafted this universe. She's got some rocks in front of her, and she's an amazing experience designer. We just can't see the experience that she's designed yet. Okay, this is our job. This is your job, not our job. I'm getting out of this business. So when I go through this process, I sometimes think, what is it that we do? So we take this rock and we put it in a box and we go, hey, this rock is special. And then we go, well, it's not special enough, so let's tell something about it. So we create an app and we get people to do something around it. And then we go, it doesn't feel right yet. So let's put more people around it and make the app shareable and do some other stuff. But really what we're trying to get to is this experience of bringing the rock back into the feeling of the temple, where you've just been transported across time and space, and you are now in the place that people created this thing. So this is the idea of where we're trying to go with some of these kinds of designs. So I'm going to walk you through some of these different processes that I have. And the cool thing is that there are amazing, amazing designers out there. Currently on exhibition, I'm going to bounce back and forth with some of the things that are happening in real time right now. At the American Museum of Natural History, the Gemstone Collection. If you guys have a chance to go to New York, go see this. This gives me goosebumps just talking about it. It's an amazing exhibition. One of the best exhibition designs I have seen in a very, very long time. And it goes through the process of telling the story of rocks, very, very pointedly and very well. Okay. There's a whole bunch of different experiences out there that are like this, okay? So these are some of the projects that I have worked on. The first one I didn't work on. This is just, the first one is an image of an exhibition at the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which is about calligraphy. And for me, the interesting thing was, how do you tell the history of illustrated manuscripts, these are Qurans and Bibles, in a setting that had people go through and be able to see the things without being able to interact with it. It came as close as possible without causing any damage to the exhibitions, without any damage to the artifacts, I mean. And the exhibition just felt so like, it just dropped people into it. The others are from the Museum of the Future, which I'll talk about a little bit, the Cleveland Museum of Art on the top right. This is done in 2012, where we had to figure out how to get people activating and interacting with art objects in the space. The next one is also the Museum of the Future, where we created a surface table, which actually created 3D objects. We're always used to interacting with glass right now in a flat plane. So we had to come up with a way of like getting the plane out to the people. The next one is at the Tech Museum in San Jose, where we created some hardware. And then the last one is at the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum in New York, which is the wallpaper room, which is a very cool exhibition where you can actually create your own wallpaper by drawing it in real time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that goes into this. This is the Fear and Loathing of the Promised Land. A lot of what you do, I've talked a little bit to some of you about this. You know, we think that design is the process of designing. It's everything but the process of designing. It's like all of the other stuff, which is, how do I get enough sleep? How do I eat properly? How do I not be a complete raving lunatic to my roommates because I've been working too many hours? How do I make sure I have a planned process for the week? How do I make sure I have enough exercise? How do I make sure I get enough sunlight? These are things that we kind of forgot about. And in a way, like this is what the engineering process behind design really is. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And really what we're trying to do is get from this idea of imagination, which we all have. And in fact, everyone in the world thinks that they have amazing imagination. You guys are great designers, and one of the things that you will find in your life is you will go and start pitching to people who have no imagination at all. It's kind of remarkable to say. And they will be like, you know, I have this amazing idea for you, like you have never thought about it. Anyway, this is something that you'll have to contend with in your own way. I'm sure you guys are better at it than I am. And you have to get to this output, which is the memorable experience, which is like, oh my God, like people are going to take Instagram pictures of it and like never forget about it. And getting there is this mess. It's hard. Like you have no idea how to like actually get to that endpoint. And mostly what we're trying to do is get to this. We want like a smooth transition from start to end, or at least as smooth as possible without creating too much friction. Now getting there is the work, you know. So this is the hard part. And the cool thing is that it all follows a pattern. I have asked a few of you if you're musicians. I'll use that as a reference coming back. You can just hold on to that thought for a second. But essentially, every experience we make is built on a system, and experiences themselves are systems. And there's this thought about systems thinking, design thinking, and all that, but I'm going to break it down to a very few fundamental components. When we make experiences, there are three key areas that I like to think about, which is technology, design, and operations. In order for an experience to work, you have to have these three things. There are a lot of other things as well, but these three things kind of fundamentally make a thing work. Operations is the physical like space and the maintenance of the space. You have facilities, you have sanitation, you have plumbing, you have lighting, you have all of this stuff that has to happen that is not the design that you were involved with, and somebody is connecting the electricity and the data and all of that, which is what we call technology right now, just in terms of oversimplification. And we do this in order to kind of satisfy the expectations of this thing that we call the visitor or the client or the customer, right? In order to get to that, there's a bunch of different things that can happen. So in this view, I'm talking very specifically from a technology perspective. There are different layers, and we call this the stack. Now, this is the boring part where a lot of people start fading out. But this is really incredibly important because if you think about everything in terms of the layers of how you build stuff up, it makes everything manageable. And by that, I mean, if you want to make an experience, let's say you want to make a mobile app. That mobile app has to connect to something. There's a control system underneath it. It has to have content management system, which has to have a database somewhere. That database has to run on a machine somewhere. That machine has to be hosted somewhere. That hosting has to have electricity somewhere. That electricity has to have some kind of another management plane to it. And it has to physically be inside a building somewhere. So if you start thinking about things like that, you realize a lot of those things, like 50, 60% of it, you may not have to think about at all. And you can just say, I can outsource it to someone. But then you go out into the real world and you start realizing you have to work with all of those people in the same company: architects, facilities engineers, operational engineers, back-end engineers, deployment architects, things like this. And having this vision for everything helps, because then you can always go, which layer do I slot people into? And there's some formal practices around this as well that we can get into after this conversation. So when I think about it in terms of like the work that we do, oftentimes I go, okay, the story breaks down in a similar way in these stacks, right? So in a museum, you might think about the fact that they're researchers, they're what I call storytellers, but this is a wide swath of different roles. And the story makers, which is in a way I call us story makers. We're not the ones telling the story, we're the ones facilitating the stories to be told, okay? And that breaks down into a few different parts. The knowledge part, the organization part, the space part, the interaction part. And you can kind of segment this however you want. But this kind of gives you a view of how these stratified views gives you a way of breaking the problem down into something a little bit more manageable. And then we get into what the roles are around this, which is, a person might be an art historian or a curator or an exhibition designer or an experience designer. And then you start seeing, oh, these things are all tied together in some really tangible way. This is the part that for me, oftentimes, I was like, how does all of this fit together? Why is a designer different from a technologist? Why is the facilities engineer not the mobile engineer? What does engineer even mean in all of this? And it started helping me to start thinking through, if these are the roles that people have, what specific task do they have to perform? Okay. Again, this is a oversimplified view of how all of this stuff works, but the thing is that they all start interacting with each other, and that diagram had them almost segmented out, but the reality is sort of more like this, okay? Somewhere in a project, you have people who have a certain amount of expertise. That expertise now has to break out to people who are senior, who are junior, and things like this. I mean, you have this in your environment. You have mentors, you have teachers, you have people who've done this kind of stuff before, and they all come with different kinds of expertise. So there might be an operations group, or a set of experts who are more experts at operations, or facilities, or IT, or AV, or experience technology. And you'll see that I'm trying to put this into this layer where really there's not a segmentation of what the skill set is, it's just a segmentation of where their expertise is. So over time, you'll realize that these are very, very fluid areas, and this is the thing I'm trying to convey. I suck at visualization, or putting these concepts into visuals. So we have to think through, how do you create a three-dimensional visual to say that everyone is kind of just in a spectrum somewhere in this set of responsibilities that we have to take for making the experience come alive, okay? This is just a view of what this looks like in the real world. At the Museum of the Future, we made an app. Great, everyone's got an app. The app was not the hard part. The app, like what this video is showing is that the app actually changes the light in the room. Okay, so the background light, you'll see the color change a little bit. In order for that to happen, we had to figure out how to do location tracking, light control, and all of this. And what you're seeing in the video of this guy running is we had to see how location tracking actually worked in space in real time, hundreds of times. The boring part, you're like going over and over and over and again, trying to just figure out if this thing works, take the metrics from it, refine it, optimize it, think about all of the error scenarios. And then that ties into the entire stack. Some parts of this tie all the way back into the turnstile system in order to enter the building. And so you have to get into like speaking with the engineers, speaking with the guys who run the cabling in the building, fixing the kind of control boards in the mobile phones when that doesn't work. And then you have a monitoring system. Just gives you a high level view of the kinds of things that people are working on in these kinds of environments. And we also think in terms of these two like roles in our experience world, which is the designers and the creative technologists. And I hope I'm now like giving you a picture of like there's all this other stuff that happens in between. And one of the things that you will have to deal with is people who work in procurement and operations and funding and accounting. This is stuff that we don't often talk about, but these are highly, highly crucial parts to making all of this stuff work. The way that we get to do our work is by somebody having money. And as long as you can if you can make it clear to those people why you're doing what you're doing, they will figure out how to give you the money. And getting people to part with their money is a very, very difficult proposition, and some people have this skill and they're magical about it. So anyway, if you gain this understanding, it is really helpful in your process, I think. Okay? And also project management. One thing I'd like to say is like a lot of times we don't think about creativity in terms of like all of these things like project management, but obviously every single role is part of the creative process, okay? So here we are. There's imagination to trying to create a memorable experience and all of this messiness in between. How do we make sense of this? And we had a couple of conversations about this, I think yesterday and a little bit today. It's this. You guys have all heard of the journey map? Everyone has seen the journey map? Yes? Anyone not know what a journey map is? Okay, you guys have been taught very, very well. It's awesome. Now, the cool thing here, this is a journey map that we had to make for the very first stage of the mobile app at the Museum of the Future. It's not one journey map. Every journey map has to have layers. So it might be a journey map for the user. It might be a journey map for the data that goes to the phone, the backend, the content, the infrastructure, the location tracking system, the deployment process. If you see all of that in one go, and then the descriptions around all this, you start getting a sense that the system is what you're building for. You don't have to understand every single bit of it, as long as you just know, oh, there's another person who's taking care of that. And sometimes you might go, oh, actually, I thought I was really interested in this part of the system, but I'm actually interested in a completely different part of the system. This is still part, like a very important thing for people to get, involved in, okay? So anyway, and so it was all prep and planning, and of course people. And at the end of doing all of that with all of our prep, all of our journey mapping, all the stuff that we made, this is the team that made it happen at the Museum of the Future. It's a super diverse group of people who kind of brought all of the stuff together, from the design to the operations to the technology to whatever. And that's what you realize. It's like being able to work with a bunch of people with diverse backgrounds to kind of execute something like this really is what makes it successful. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have this kind of diversity of people coming in and having that final experience as well. Oftentimes it looks like this. And during COVID, it really did, because that's what we were doing. We were like, oh my God. And this is a mild one. We had screens with like 50 people, but sadly, Zoom didn't allow me to like make all of them into one screenshot. So anyway. But this is actually one of the calls that we had at the Museum of the Future. We dealt with 13 different creative design teams for 3 different floors, so roughly 3 to 4 designers per floor. That was just the design teams, and then behind them there were fit-out teams, architecture teams, AV teams. So altogether, something like 80 different teams that we were coordinating and putting it together. And the project managers, they're unbelievable, so good at this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to switch track a little bit and talk about the output of experience design, which is this thing called sonography. So I talked a little bit about it to some people before the presentation. So this term sonography it's been used for a long time, but I like it because what we build as an experience fits within a thing. So we're basically making theater. So it's the scene is what is being set, and we're actually trying to make the experience in the space. And a thing that I saw recently in a magazine is a real estate company that's advertising immersive experiences. So the term immersive experiences is like, it's relatively diluted at this point. I mean, I'm not sure that this is an immersive experience, although literally it is an immersive experience. You are immersed in their experience. I don't think you can get any more didactic than that, you know? So it's great. But we also have this kind of confusion of terminology at this point, which is a little bit problematic. So I want to talk a little bit about the kind of immersive experiences that I worked on. 9/11 Museum in New York, it is not about screens and visuals or projections just on walls, even though that is what you're seeing. There's a lot of stuff in the space. Pulling people away from the walls is part of this idea of scenography, and adding texture. We left a lot of the concrete. We left it's called the last column, the metal edges of it, that you could get a sense of how the building actually came about, what the slurry walls feel like. Similarly, at the Cooper Hewitt, the tables are in the middle of the space. It could have easily been interactions on the wall, but we moved away from that. The pen was used as a mechanism of like getting people to feel like they were part of the design process. And then at the Museum of the Future, of course, like where we put a lot of effort, the architects put a lot of effort into the space. Subsequently, we put a lot of effort into the interior design. I was not part of the architecture process, only of the interior exhibition design process. So even in that, we had to think through how to get people to navigate through space. Think about like what those kind of those touch and feel and haptic responses were going to be. And ultimately, we're going for sentiment. And really, like what we're constantly playing with is this idea of how do we take the five senses and constantly try and balance that out all the time, not just go, sight is the only way that we can do interactions or immersive experiences, okay? There's another part, sorry, I realize I'm running a little bit late, but there's a cool thing that happened in the Museum of the Future, which is the operations team took it on themselves as an experience to give out this thing called a golden ticket. Any staff could give a golden ticket out to visitors. Any visitor could give a golden ticket out to staff. And this was really just a way of creating a relationship between staff and visitors. This is something that we did not think about at all. It was completely taken on by the operations team. It was like, wow, this is such a creative process. And it ended up really creating bonds between different people. So the first image is actually of a girl who was autistic. She was very triggered by all of the lighting around. One of the staff decided to just take her around, hold her the whole time, and she had an amazing experience. And this is the sort of thing that we often don't think about in design, like how does the operational aspect of a space really work? I want to tell a story, but can somebody help tell the story, because people have to absorb my version of the story within 30 seconds, and I've had 2 years to kind of craft it. You know? All right. So, experience design is really people. It's from a bad 1970-something movie. Somebody may recognize it. And I don't know what happened to the text on this one. So spaces are the new interactive canvas. This is the thing that I am really excited about. This is the stuff that we are working on now. In a way, like it has been really hard to do experience design in space so far. And I'm saying that with a lot of caveats. For us to be able to do experiences in spaces, we need to be able to have metrics and monitors and try and understand how it works. Some of those tools are very complicated until recently. One thing that we pulled off at the Museum of the Future that I want to show you is this idea of building a mobile app that could actually go through and trigger other things in a space physically. And this is an app that it wasn't a device that we gave visitors. It was on the public network. And so there's a whole series of things that have to happen in order for the physical, like the lights or the video, the screens in a space, to be able to bidirectionally talk to devices. We did this, we were really proud of it, and then AI came along, and what we took 2 years to do can probably be done in about 2 weeks or 2 months now. you know? So the potential for this kind of interaction is really amazing, and you can actually start building on top of it. And the idea here is to now think, what does a conversation with a space really look like? Well, a conversation with a human being, you understand. If another person interjects into your conversation, you know how to deal with it. But the way that a space has to pause if you interrupt it, if somebody else tries to do something, what happens? You have to think about these contention situations a lot, okay? And it starts getting into things like spaces, like we talk about generative AI in spaces, where this is a real-time generated media output in a restaurant in Dubai. That was done by some friends of ours, some partners of ours. And it is a very complicated process to think about generative AI in terms of the frames that you have to put out in this whole process. And these are the kinds of tools that we're starting to see, right? I mean, you've all seen things like LLMs, OpenAI, and stuff like that. But then you have agentic workflows that are using things like N8N. You have this really, really cool technology called MCP that's coming up. I don't know how many of you have heard of MCP. A few of you. It's kind of like magic in one way, but it's a magic that you have to really know the incantations very carefully, because just like all magic, you can do really horrible things, and then you get snakes in people's brains and things like that, So this kind of stuff you have to be careful about. But what this gives us the potential for is really making conversations with spaces in a way that has not happened before, There are layers that we can expose that we just have not been able to do because of the complexity historically, and this is all becoming easier for us. And this is, again, part of this point of getting from an idea to an output is getting from a deterministic to a probabilistic world. Like, we're going through this process now of, in this AI-driven world, there's this huge amount of complexity where we thought, okay, we have an idea and we're going to get to an output. Now we're getting to AI is somewhere in the mix, and we don't know what that output is going to look like. AI says, I promise I will produce what you asked me to do. And it says, here's the thing that I produced for you. And you go, well, this is not what I asked you to do. Redo it, and it still produces something else. So we're in this process of trying to figure out what that is. And in a way, this is what the history of humanity was. Until basically 200, 300, 400 years ago, we guessed what would happen in the world. Okay, we had an intuition about stuff. And then we went through a world where essentially things started getting codified. I'm using some arbitrary markers in time. I think the Gutenberg press was the point where, because of widespread printing, we all said the written word is the word. This is the irrefutable, immutable truth. Prior to that, we all had an audio way of doing things, and we had to kind of guess about the truth of what somebody told you. But now we're getting back to AI may or may not tell you the truth, and you have to figure out what this does. That part is one thing, but when you get into experience design, this is even more complicated, because if the experience that you make today is not the experience that the visitor sees 10 days from now, what happens? How do we contend with this? It's an interesting challenge. And there's a bunch of different questions around this that we are also trying to pose for ourselves. Things like, if this happens, can we have spaces that heal? Because everyone is subjective. If we have this kind of malleability, can we have spaces that are also malleable so it helps people to actually feel differently in each space? There's an active project that we're working on right now. Can materials converse? So far, when you go to a wall, the wall just stays there. What if the wall can push back on you? What if the wall talks back to you? What if the floor changes based on how you feel? These are the things that are actually possible within our lifetime, which was very, very complicated before this, just because the amount of data that you need in order to be able to do this is very complicated. So Megan talked about all of the infrastructure of Waymo. Those are the things that I think I'm super excited about when she talks about the built environment can now start giving us more feedback. As a result of Waymo fixing that and providing all that kind of tooling, we can now think in terms of how does the entire environment essentially become a canvas for us to play with. This is really cool stuff. Can we build probabilistically? I don't know. My entire career has been about a deterministic, engineered, repeatable process. But if we switch that out, maybe we get to something even cooler. I don't know. And then, at the end of this, are we designing for robots? I don't know. Maybe that's all we'll be doing is designing for robots. There's one other weird idea that I have been trying to figure out, which I'll just throw out to you, which is, can we notate experiences just like music notation? Is it possible for us to do this? Because if we do this, then we can have a common language to talk, because these are complex things that we're doing, okay? All right. I know I'm way over, but I'm going to just go through this anyway. There's one of the prompts that I was given a long time ago by a friend is, what needs to be done and what are you doing about it? And this is something that has like stuck in me through my entire career. And my career has gone through a bunch of different stuff. I started in engineering, I ended up in experience design, and I've gone through everything from doing solar-powered projects in iguana farms in New Mexico, to audio engineering and DJing, to farming, to I was at US Robotics when the Palm Pilot was happening, and I had this grand vision that Palm Pilot would take over the world. Anyone know what the Palm Pilot is? Okay, 30%, 40%. I literally thought this company would take over the world. But anyway, I went through a bunch of it, community media, social gaming, all of this. The reason I say this is because the more experiences you have, the better experienced designer you become, you know? And for me, this is one of the things that really taught me a lot. I went out and I worked with a team called Project Hello Hubs. We built these outdoor community, solar-powered, interactive kiosks in Uganda at 4 different sites. It's a very, very complicated project. To do outdoor electronics is a very, very complicated thing. I didn't understand a lot of those implications at the time. Today, it's gotten a little bit easier. The project is still continuing under Projects for All. And Pangea Education does this mobile library project. And you start thinking, oh, it's just books in a cart. Okay. As you start digging into these problems, you start thinking, wow, like even simple problems have like layers of complexity that we didn't think about. So it really helps me to think through my design process when I work on projects like this. So I would suggest strongly that you actually get out and you have some of these things. Yesterday, I talked a little bit about one of my inspirations being foraging. Sorry, I forgot her name. Darcy. I'm so sorry. Darcy also introduced me as an urban forager. I love going to markets because the colors that you see at markets are beyond any Pantone like mood board that you will ever see. And sometimes I'm like, how can I get this texture and like the weight? Like, anyone know jackfruits? Everyone know jackfruits? Okay. It's insane that this thing grows on a tree. It is completely like, I'm like, nature is bonkers, right? Like I said yesterday, why would there be square petals? It doesn't make any sense. And like, you know, there are flowers that look like this. And I'm like, the inspiration is out there. And the cool thing about it is that nature didn't accidentally make this. Nature made this in order to attract bees and humans and animals and whatever else. Nature is the best advertising tool out there. Nature knows how to do advertising better than we ever will. You know, sorry, Nick. But you know, it is a cool inspiration for me to also go, okay, some of these things, obviously it gets to that because nature knows what it has to get out of that output. It has an objective, you know? It's kind of fun. Okay, I'm gonna wrap now. My niece. This, again, I wanna leave this picture in your head. You have to find somebody who you think is your design target. For me, she's always in mind of like, okay, what is she thinking about? How can I make this stuff? And there's a quote I want to leave you with, which is by a friend of mine, Toshi Hu, who said, storytelling is humanity's existential survival tool. This, for me, is the driving motive of why I have to do this. I do not know another way to make humanity okay. We're in a very, very difficult time on some level. I don't want to leave it on a negative note at all. But the power of storytelling is so incredible, like truly unbelievable. Everything else can collapse and stories will bring us back. I have seen this before. I've seen this in war zones. I've seen it in refugee camps. I've seen it in cases where people are entirely destitute and they hold on to their stories. And our job is to give them a way to tell their stories. Okay? I don't think I get a QA right now. That's later. Thank you very much. Sorry for going long.